Here, use this.
I think it goes without saying that not every game ends up panning out, and not every idea ends up going somewhere. Sometimes games are intended as a one-shot idea, and other times they're intended as the start of a series that ends up never making it past the first entry. But then you get the rare instance where a game spawns an entire series that has a respectable amount of entries and just disappears. Koudelka is that game. This is one of those lesser spoken of PlayStation 1 games that was trying to meld a few ideas into one game and do something different from those around it, and it actually succeeded and was the first entry in a series of games called Shadow Hearts. No relation to Kingdom Hearts. That's a series for another video, another day. Maybe when I get Shin in here we can do that one. While you're waiting for that though, you can watch this video instead. Back to Shadow Hearts. Shadow Hearts was a series of RPGs for the PlayStation 2 back in the very early 2000s, developed by a group called Saknoth, later called Nautilus. A handful of people who are probably now legally classified as old prunes like myself watching this video might have heard of them, but they were definitely the lesser known games of their time. With heavy hitters like Final Fantasy, Dark Cloud, Disgaea, and even the Tales series in the PlayStation 2, all by studios that are much more well known and revered, it's no wonder that Shadow Hearts found itself lost in the shuffle. The PlayStation 2 was in fact a RPG giant after all. However, many people who were fans of the series might not even know that Shadow Hearts wasn't the first game in the franchise, and actually was a game from the PlayStation 1 called Koudelka. Koudelka is a unique monster, born from the vision of this man, Hiroki Kikuta. Hiroki was a former employee for Square who worked on Secret of Mana and Trials of Mana, until he left the company to form the studio that would ultimately bring out his dream vision to life. Koudelka was his baby, his dream project, and he was extremely involved with its design. He wrote the story, composed the music, and was heavily involved in the design process. This guy even traveled to Wales to study the country that the game would take place in, so he was pretty dedicated to this project. You can't say the man was not committed to his dream, even if it didn't end up as successful as Final Fantasy. Koudelka would begin life in 1997, when our boy Hiroki decided that he wanted out of Square Enix, just as they were about to release the legendary Final Fantasy VII, all because he believed that he wanted to take RPGs in a different direction. He began work with his newfound team on Koudelka, which would see the world in 1999 Japan and 2000 for the rest of us, though just barely in 1999 Japan. Unfortunately for him, and this might be a contributing factor as to why it didn't get as much attention, Koudelka would release right after the PlayStation 2 hit the scene. And by the time it released in the United States, the PlayStation 2 would have already been around for a good 8 months or so. So most people weren't really looking at PlayStation 1 games at this point. The PlayStation 2 was an extremely popular console that was in high demand. Everybody was talking about it when it came out. So as a result, a lot of PlayStation 1 games that came out at the end of the PlayStation 1 era were kind of lost in that shuffle. A lot of great PS1 games actually came out in 2000, but many were not observed as much as they could have been because they came out on last-gen hardware, and back then the difference between graphic hardware from day one was very drastic, unlike it is now. So it wasn't uncommon for games to be completely overshadowed. Many games just got completely forgotten when the new hardware hit the scene. Nowadays, we look at PlayStation 4 games, PlayStation 5 games from when the PlayStation 5 released, and we think that graphics weren't that drastically different right from day one. But it was not like that back then. Back then, the graphics would look insanely different. The big question though is Koudelka even a good game? Was it a hidden gem that didn't get a chance to shine, or a stinky poo-poo that should stay buried in the sands of time? Are we dealing with Pac-Man 2 The New Adventures, or are we dealing with Sonic Heroes? For the only where Sonic Heroes is a pretty bad Sonic game, but we'll get to that in another day. Well, there's no sense in hyping up, so let's get on with the video so we can talk about that, shall we? Here's something you can't say about Koudelka, and that's that it shirks on design, because it doesn't. It has a great gothic aesthetic to complement the time period. It looks very Lovecraftian, and that's always cool in my book. But I've always been more of a Giger guy myself, but that's just personal taste. Still, everything looks stylized, great, and the environments are detailed, and the graphics are pretty damn impressive for the PlayStation 1. Koudelka from a design standpoint looks gorgeous, and has the atmosphere and soul in it that you'd expect. It's stylized well, and the music for these battle sequences really slaps. But that's to be expected because our boy Hiroki is actually a musician and does all the music himself, and honestly, it does a great job. Some people might find it dumb that a lot of the game is silent, but that's kind of tension building. Music only appears when it's needed. Half-Life did the same thing, we all love that game, so I don't want to hear it. I've always hated the idea that people act like different genres of games have these strict, rigorous rules that must be followed, and only games not in that genre get to do things differently. Music in a game is intended to help build atmosphere and set the scene. So if there are moments where it's just there to be there, and it isn't actively adding to the atmosphere, then what's the point? Koudelka knows when to use music and when to create a silent suspense. Because this isn't just a JRPG, it's also blended with a horror game. Yes, it's a Parasite Eve situation, where it's an RPG combined with horror elements, but while Parasite Eve was more of an action feel to it and a biological horror theme, Koudelka is more grounded in suspense and Lovecraftian horror and the supernatural. It's by no means a scary game, but the monsters are pretty creepy looking and there's this foreboding atmosphere the entire game. You're getting your standard PlayStation 1 stuff here though. Static image backgrounds with static camera angles to create the illusion of three-dimensional space. But honestly, this was the thing to do back then, and it's by no means a mark against it, as it's not the only game that does it, and it does it very well. Also, the character models are pretty good looking for the time period. Graphic-wise, Koudelka looks pretty good. It's not very tank control-y either, so that alone makes it easier to play in modern days as well. You never really feel like you're just fighting against the trolls the entire time. Though I will admit that using the temporary save spots feels a little bit awkward at times until you get used to them. The big thing I like to talk about when it comes to this game, though, is how it really took advantage of all the unique things the PlayStation 1 can do, which set it apart from its graphically superior N64 counterpart, and why we get games like this on this system. Koudelka takes full advantage of the CD technology the PlayStation 1 was famous for, and uses that space to have high-quality audio for the game's in-game music, and voice acting, which is actually pretty damn decent for the time period, though a little stiff at times.
But you'll have to pardon me while I tend to some unfinished business first.
Business? What can you possibly accomplish in your condition? You can't even hold your gun steady.
It also has those full motion video cutscenes that the PlayStation 1 was known for, and they look absolutely gorgeous to be honest. Because of all this though, Koudelka is 4 discs, despite only being really a 12-hour game. But that's kind of the advantage of the PlayStation 1, is that you could really make these beautiful looking cinematic moments without much compromise. Koudelka's actual battle system though is sort of a tactical RPG situation. Think Final Fantasy Tactics, but much more basic. You have a grid playing field where you have to move into position to attack, and you have the magic abilities and various different weapons that you can use. And this is the part of the video where I talk about some of the flaws of the game. The battle system is nice at first, but it does have a few things that I wasn't a fan of. I'll start with the most basic. The time it takes to finish battles is way too long. Fights tend to drag on and on and on, making them a test of your patience sometimes. Even entering a fight is an entirely drawn-out sequence. Take a look. This would have been really cool to do for like boss fights or maybe the first time you see an enemy, but it gets really old really fast because you get to see it every single time. You eventually just wish you could skip it and start blasting. It is a bigger problem later in the game where some of these fights really drag on way too long due to the animations need to play out in full. Another issue I have is there's no way to really cancel out of a previous action. Once you hit move, you've committed to moving to that spot. It's not like Advance Wars where you can move, see what kind of damage an attack would do, and then decide not to commit to it. Nope, you're locked in here. The plus side is Koudelka's enemy encounter rate feels very fair. It hits that just right spot to where you feel like you get enough encounters where if you want to grind a few levels on purpose, it's not a time-consuming matter, but you're also not barraged with the same amount of enemies you had in Persona 1 where you had to fight something every 11 seconds. It's rare that an enemy gets the encounter rate just right, but Koudelka definitely does. A common complaint about RPGs in general of this time period, though, is that there's also no way to check enemy statuses, affinities, weaknesses, nothing. Everything is trial and error, meaning figuring out what element, weakness an enemy has is basically guesswork. But this is a problem across the board. Even my beloved Chrono Trigger didn't really tell you what enemy elemental weaknesses were, keep track of them in anywhere. But at least in that game, they were much easier to guess, and a few times in the game they did directly give you some kind of hint. The stat system is unique though because you actually have to try and balance stats or they don't really work properly. If you raise the character's piety stat too high, it'll make it so that while they have a huge MP bar, they'll be resistant to healing magic. Or if you raise a character's strength too high, they will hit super hard where they put Goku and Saitama to shame, but they will rarely hit because their dexterity is too low. It's all a unique balancing act, and it's definitely possible to create a really terrible character build that will make the rest of the game miserable. On top of all that, you also have everyone's favorite thing in a game, weapon durability. And it's invisible.
No! God, please, no! 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 No!
Weapons can break after enough use, and once they're broken, they're gone for good.
Made in Britain.
And this means being very careful with how you approach every encounter because there is no shop in this game. Yep, no shop, no currency, nothing. Your items you have for items, you have to either find them around the monastery or get them as random drops from enemies. This means resource management is a crucial part of the game, giving it a survival horror theme a little bit. The good news is the game is pretty decently generous with items, so you never feel completely strapped. Parasite Eve did this as well, but it was much more generous with its ammo drops. In Koudelka, you really have to manage those resources well if you want to survive, because you could end up in a situation where you're out of bullets for your guns, and all of your melee weapons are broken, and you're just stuck with hand-to-hand combat, and magic until you have a few lucky drops. Bullets are pretty limited in the game, so you don't want to waste them all on weak enemies. I actually don't mind this system, but it does make grinding less enjoyable if you're into that like I am. I mean, come on, I play RuneScape, obviously I'm into grinding. What I do mind, though, is weapon durability. Seriously, I loathe weapon durability in games, but I especially hate it when it's invisible and the weapons break way too easily. I don't mind situations where the weapon has like a health bar and it drains after literal hours of use and can be repaired, but when a weapon's only good for like 50 uses and then it's just gone, I find that super annoying. It kind of reminds me of the Razor Sword in Majora's Mask. Like, seriously, what was even the point if it was only going to be good for 100 swings? Another thing that is a weird design choice is using magic to heal your party from the menu screen outside of battles. It just doesn't allow you to control which character is casting the healing spell, so it just kind of uses one at random, so you have to keep that in mind when you go to use it. One thing I really like, though, is how agility as a stat actually plays a real role in battle rather than determining who goes first. But it determines how many turns an action might take to complete or how many times the enemy gets a turn before you do. Because yes, you can actually sometimes have instances where the enemy gets multiple turns in a row, which I might add can suck sometimes when they just wipe out your entire party and you barely get a chance to retaliate because your agility's too low. And of course, death means going back to the last save point. All of that is far from a deal breaker though, because when you get past its flaws, the battles are still engaging and the game will keep you hooked and begging for more just to see what it has to offer. There is one omission that I have to bring up, and for this next part I brought in my good friend Barista Gamer, as he can cover this way better than I can. Koudelka has fully voiced dialogue, which for the time period was impressive and ambitious, because pretty much every single instance of dialogue is voiced. But there's one crucial flaw. There are no subtitles whatsoever. Literally none. Only a Japanese version, and they're only in Japanese. So if you're deaf or hard of hearing, you basically can't even play this game. Subtitles were not an industry standard at the time, but many games that came out before Koudelka, such as Silent Hill on the exact same console, had them, so I don't want to hear any excuses. Barista Gamer is very well versed in the subject because he himself is deaf and a game developer, and he had to say this about subtitles in video games.
Subtitles in video games was not something I had seen until literally Super Mario Sunshine, when the cutscenes were subtitled. It's odd, but subtitles were not as widely required in the games industry as they are today. As a kid whose favorite game was Spyro Year of the Dragon, the omission of subtitles in the cutscenes really took me off the game. I also could not play a lot of weird PC games like Nightmare and Ned because subtitles were not in there either. Even Assassin's Creed on the PlayStation 3 had no subtitles. I was really excited to play that game while I go for Christmas, but the lack of subtitles really killed my interest in that story. My example of Assassin's Creed is odd because 3 years earlier, Half-Life 2 broke ground by being the first fully closed captioned game. It did just cover the cutscene dialogue, but also contextual sounds and the like. I guess because of that, the games industry actually began to take subtitling more seriously. Subtitles in video games really come a long way thanks to Half-Life 2, because when we come to the early 2010s and forwards, game devs actually began to really look into making the subtitles more accessible for everyone, like changing the text size and also subtitle backgrounds being adjustable. Nowadays, I think subtitles in video games are hard mandated AAA practice, so I think we are in about as good a spot as it can get when it comes to subtitles in video games.
It's super easy to forget that accessibility in games and not being included is basically locking people out of games. And keep in mind, this was in the early 2000s where the internet was still a growing thing, and thus looking up what happened in the game wasn't as simple as it is now. There wasn't as many video walkthroughs or game scripts that you could basically check through to find out what was going on in the game. So if you were deaf back then, you just couldn't play this game. You can actually check out Bursa Gamer yourself on his channel. I'm going to leave a link for it in the description below. He has worked on a few games and he's in the process of developing his own game right now, so you definitely give his stuff a look, and thank you to him for contributing to this video. I genuinely hope the YouTube subtitles allow him to be able to view it as well. I'm super thankful that the YouTube auto-captioning system has gotten so much better for people to the point where it's actually fairly usable, because doing the subtitles myself for this video would be very time consuming because I am a one-man crew. So it's good that that feature is available so that other people are not completely locked out of watching my videos. Koudelka's design may not be perfect, but it has a lot of cool ideas going on, and its flaws don't make it an unenjoyable experience, that's for sure. It's a great game with a lot of heart put into it, and honestly, if this was the starting point for the Shadow Hearts series, it's a pretty strong one because Koudelka definitely tried to do something different and think outside of the box. This game doesn't feel like it was trying to be another Final Fantasy clone or generic RPG, but instead something unique and interesting. I would even go as far to say that it deserves a proper remaster to iron out some of its flaws. Maybe speed the battles up a little bit, add status screens for enemies, change a few things and issues that I talked about, and people would really enjoy this game. Still, even in its flawed state, Koudelka is fun, and that's a big thing. It's fun. It's an experience that feels fun to play.
If it's not fun, why bother?
With all of its design out of the way, now we have to ask ourselves, what is the story like? Well, we'll get to that right now. Hopefully I didn't do that thing where I forget to use the right title card for this part of the video again. Anyway, story. What is even happening in this game? What's going on? What's our motivation? Well, the year is 1898 and the place is Wales. You know, Wales, that lesser spoken country about in the UK? Okay, little side story here, but once I was in a trivia contest where we were asked to name all the countries in the UK, and I included Wales in my answer, and I was told that I was wrong. The judge insisted that Wales wasn't a real country. But to my luck, there just happened to be someone from the UK who corrected him. Wales just gets no respect, does it? Literally, Wales gets ripped on by everyone, even the Welsh. But real talk, I hear it's actually very beautiful there, though I've never been. The game is about the titular Koudelka, a 19-year-old spirit medium who's called to the Nemeton Monastery by spirits in distress begging for help. Koudelka meets Edward, a treasured hunter who gets rescued by Koudelka right at the start of the game, who joins her in exploring this monastery. Not too far in, they meet James, a bishop working for the Vatican, who is quite the preacher.
Far be it from me to expect any words of gratitude from you.
I see, and I can tell from your appearances that the power of your faith alone was not enough to smooth things out with that monster.
It wasn't the kind of problem that faith alone could solve.
Ugh.
James is clearly a devout man, but despite his distaste for heathens such as Koudelka and Edward, he agrees to join them, and thus you have your party assembled. Yep. 3 characters. No backup characters, no party swapping, none of that. Simplicity. To reference Parasite Eve again, I think people get so used to having parties so large that they are regularly swapping people in and out that they forget the wonderful simplicity of a small party. Parasite Eve had literally just you, no other party members, and that game ruled. Koudelka focuses on a very small cast of characters, and I'm not talking about just your party, but in general. But it tries to flesh them all out nicely. There's tons of optional cutscenes you can see if you explore to get a clearer picture of what's happening. It's not too long after your arrival, though, that the elderly couple caring for the monastery tries to poison Edward and Koudelka, but she sees right through it.
Speaking of which, you wasted all of that food. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, if it weren't poisoned, then I would have had some.
Pardon?
I said, if the soup weren't poisoned, then I would have had some. Got it?
Poisoned? No way.
Just a little bit. I smelled some poisonous plant.
Koudelka eventually convenes with the spirits of the monastery to better understand their situation.
Kill them! They cut off my fingers. They crushed my legs. They smashed my head and cut out my guts. They took everything from me. They locked me up and chopped my body.
Ah! Oh, my eye!
eyes! Ah, my ears! Ah, they're burned! Help! Help!
Okay then. So basically what's happening here is there's clearly a lot of human sacrifices going on in this house of God. The group encounter Roger Bacon. Yes, that is his name. Roger Bacon. No relation to Hollywood movie star Kevin Bacon, might add.
Holy Savior! The secret of the Fomors from the bottom of the sea. Immigrate!
Where are my manners? Hello! My name is Roger Bacon. I am a monk from the Franciscan order.
A monk?
Who is Roger Bacon, you ask? Well, he's an immortal philosopher from the 13th century that is an expert in alchemy. No, that isn't some kind of bit I'm doing. That's literally the situation.
I've been around for 20 years, and I have yet to run across an old man as abnormal as yourself.
I see. Well, I've been around for 600 years, and I've seen plenty of abnormal people just like myself.
My dear old man, might you be related to the great warlock Roger Bacon, who made such a name for himself in the 13th century?
You are very knowledgeable. I am that warlock, Roger Bacon, you speak of.
You mean to tell me that you were born in 1210 and have remained alive and well until the present date of 1898?
Actually, to be precise, I was born in 1214.
Koudelka, what type of a joke is this?
That's my question.
Well, this is no joke. I am the reputable Roger Bacon.
This guy is apparently a recurring character in the entire franchise, so hope you like his ugly mug. I mean, he has a face that only a mother could love, right? The group encounter a spirit in the cells in the lower levels named Charlotte. And this is kind of cool because it's sort of like an introduction to a boss fight later where you get to give her a set of letters that you can optionally find and bypass the fight. So Koudelka kind of rewards you for exploring and trying stuff out. So, what's really happening here? Well, I'm going to explain to you all now. See, James is actually connected to what's going on, in that his motivation for being at the monastery is not exactly what he claims. See, he came here because of dual interests, one of which being to find a document stolen from the Vatican, but the other because he once pined for the wife of the owner of the monastery, Elaine. When he was young, he wanted to be with Elaine, but he was far too low in the social standing for her liking. Tough break, dude. Anyway, Elaine ended up with a man named Patrick Hayworth, a wealthy man who saw her as the most precious creature in the world. Patrick went away one night and a group of robbers came to their home looking for riches and ended up murdering Elaine. Patrick was left devastated until he learned that the document from the Vatican could be used in some kind of dark ritual to return his beloved to him. With the document in hand, Patrick headed to the monastery where he began the process of trying to bring Elaine back. There was just one catch. He would need many human sacrifices to pull this off. So naturally, he enlists the help of his servants, the caretakers from earlier that tried to poison the protagonist, to lure people to the monastery to kill them and sacrifice them. This explains why they were trying to kill you, and why they're ignoring all the monsters the player encounter. It also kind of explains what the monsters are. Clearly the lost souls of people sacrifice haunting this godforsaken place. We find Patrick's corpse right at the base of the sacrificial altar too, with no explanation how he died, but his efforts were successful. Sort of. You see, he manages to bring Elaine back, but only as a corpse. Her soul is the constant anguish, which is why she called out to Koudelka in the first place. The party, under the advice of Roger Bacon, seriously, I can't believe that's the name they went with, sets the monastery ablaze and heads to the church to confront Elaine. And, oh god, no! This boss absolutely sucks. He is a serious pain in the rear end. Basically, how it works is he can only be damaged when he's not in this frenzied state. How do you predict when he enters the frenzied state? You can't. It's almost completely random, and the worst part is magic often takes 2 turns to cast. Meaning, you could be casting a spell and then he enters the frenzied state before you land the hit. What's even worse is that if that happens, he heals. There is one saving grace here, is there is a mechanic in Koudelka that can be completely abused once you figure it out. Stat buffing spells in Koudelka not only do not degrade during a fight, meaning they will last the entire fight unless you get debuffed, but they stack. Once you figure this out, you can hilariously just keep buffing a character's agility, magic damage to absurd levels. This guy's probably harder than the final boss, but eventually he goes down. Finally, to break down the final door, you're going to need some explosives, which you can backtrack to go get the stuff to do so with. Where you're treated to a scene where Koudelka tells a bit of her backstory.
You must be joking. Have you ever cried and begged for your next meal? Did you ever sell your body, seeking shelter from the frigid night air? I used to be just like Charlotte. When she cried and said, "No one has ever loved me." Her words cut straight through me.
And at last, when you blow the door open and finally confront Elaine's corpse. You gotta run all the way to top the church to finish this fight, but once you do, you're face to face with the final boss. So, there's 3 endings here that you can get, all depending on what you do in this fight. If you didn't find the special pendant in the middle game, then the fight begins and Elaine literally melts the skin off your bones and you're dead. Game over. The good ending is kind of messed up because Elaine's spirit reunites with her body only seconds before she dies. Talk about tragic. Then the last ending is this.
God, is this my fault? Do you blame me? Are you punishing me now because the path to my faith was tainted? I accept my fate. If it is your wish, then I accept my fate. He who has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to go into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. I am what I am. I am content with my lot. I have always loved you, Elaine.
Let's go home, James. Let's go home. I have such fond memories of those days.
No! Flames are coming this way!
Don't be silly. There must be something we can do.
We'll be fine. Trust me.
The credits roll and you get to enjoy the ending music. Oh, and by the way, the ending where James sacrifices himself is the canon ending. This is particularly interesting to me because I don't think I've ever seen a game to where to get the true ending, you need to lose at the final battle. Yes, to get that ending, you actually have to get to the final battle, wearing the pendant, and then lose. Koudelka is just built different. If you were hoping for New Game Plus, well, you're out of luck. While my beloved Chrono Trigger had invented the concept 5 years prior, it wasn't really a standard in the RPG space just yet. Though ironic because the game's creators all worked on Square prior to this, so they were pretty familiar with the concept. This may have to do with the fact that Koudelka was a pretty ambitious project as it was. Hiroki had big dreams and read hundreds of books and did research for months to come up with this vision for Koudelka. He even had to scale his vision back because having a fairly small staff and budget to work with. Thus why the game takes place entirely over a single night in a single location. Why would you play Koudelka again? Well, I would say to see the different endings, but realistically you can reload your final save file to see the other endings, so it's not necessary to play the entire game again for that. Unless of course you fail to find that pendant, but I'm fairly sure as long as you save before entering that final door, you can backtrack to go get it. But there are fun extra scenes you can find if you explore enough though, and slightly different story paths you can take. Even an optional boss that you can try and fight to get the best weapons in the game. It could also be fun to try different character builds and experiment a little bit. Koudelka would definitely be worth a replay solely just for the fun factor, provided you can look past its flaws, and naturally modern emulators can fix some of them, such as the long battle sequences can be sped up with emulators. There really isn't any unlockables that finish the game, but that's okay because Koudelka doesn't overstay its welcome, unlike some games. It's not a very long game, maybe only 12 hours to finish, but it's still pretty decent, and it's definitely not one that will take so long that you wouldn't want to try it again. Again, sometimes short and sweet is the best way to go. Koudelka was supposed to be the start of something big, a revolution to the RPG formula, and while it didn't set the world on fire like it had hoped, it's still a massive achievement, even if it was a flawed one. I can really appreciate what this game did and what it was trying to do. Hiroki's ambition pays off here because Koudelka was a pioneer in many fronts. The cutscenes were some of the very first motion-captured cutscenes in video games, and they're pretty impressive. Not to mention the voice acting is several steps above the competition for the time period. It may come off a little stiff by today's standards, but that's far from terrible.
If these treasures can be contributed to the Vatican, their value to Christianity is unquantifiable.
It just needs subtitles, as I mentioned earlier in my segment contributed by Barista Gamer. Hiroki had actually planned several sequels out, all the way up to Koudelka number 4. The Shadow Hearts games were apparently only intended as side stories to his original vision. You know, I kind of feel like me and this guy would get along great. His brain seems to work a lot like my own, thinking of ideas he wants to do long before he's even got the first one out. That's sort of how I operate, really. The amount of games I want to cover is nuts, but I have to narrow my focus to one at a time, sadly. Still, Koudelka is worthy of your time if you like JRPGs and you love the PlayStation era of them. I would definitely recommend it. It has a bit of a slow burn to it, but it's definitely a fun game. I'm so glad that I finally got a chance to play it because I've actually been interested in this game for a long time, and the entire franchise, and I definitely want to check out the other Shadow Heart games. What about all of you? Have any of you played Koudelka, or is this your first time even hearing about it? Let's discuss it in the comment section below. Also, big shout out to Barista Gamer for his segment. I'm hoping the subtitles feature on YouTube works well enough for him to see this video. I try to talk as clearly as possible so that it's as accurate as possible. Fun fact, he doesn't even know what game I'm doing this video on when he did his segment, so this will all be a surprise to him too. I've left a link to his channel in the description. You can check out the development of the game that he's working on. He also produces a comic called Gem Hunters, full of gamer humor if you're into that. I always get a chuckle out of them. Also, we have a Discord server now. I will leave a link for it in the description so you can all join it. I have a few bigger projects coming up that I'm excited to work with some other people with, so expect more guest appearances down the road here. Anyway, I'm WizPlay, and that's enough of that.